So today we're going to focus on the energy organelles. These are structures, organelles in our cells that are responsible for energy production and energy usage in cells. So before we can really jump into those organelles themselves and the processes that we do, we need to take a step back and just remember how organisms get their energy. And when we look at organisms, we can split them into two categories. We can talk about them being autotrophs, can they create their own energy? Or heterotrophs, do they need to consume or need to eat other organisms in order to get the energy that they need? And when we look at the two major processes that happen, the two major chemical metabolic processes that happen in cells, we talk about photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So autotrophs, most kids recognize these guys as plants, right? These are organisms like plants. Algae also fall into this, certain types of bacteria. They can use energy from the sun to create their own energy for themselves to be able to do stuff in their cells, move materials in and out of the cell, move organelles around the cytoplasm, things like that. That all requires energy, and in autotrophs, they can take the energy from the sun and convert it into energy that their cells can actually use. How they do that, most kids recognize they do photosynthesis, but they really are also doing cellular respiration. And the reason for that is because if I look over here, here's the energy from the sun. That's going to come into these organelles called chloroplasts, and those exist in our plants. That's why our plants look green. They take in that energy, go through photosynthesis, and create this molecule called glucose, so sugar, and oxygen. But that's not energy that the cell can use. So what the plants then do is take that glucose, take that sugar, and that oxygen, and use their mitochondria to go through cellular respiration. And that's where they create the energy to do things, to move materials, to make other chemical reactions happen, that kind of thing. And then the byproducts of cellular respiration are water and carbon dioxide that also feed back into photosynthesis and keep this whole process going. So if I'm an autotroph, I get to do this whole diagram. I go through photosynthesis, make sugars and oxygen with help from the sun, go through cellular respiration to make energy so my cells can do things, and then I also give off water and carbon dioxide that feed back into my photosynthesis. If you are a heterotroph, on the other hand, you have to consume other organisms, plants, other animals, in order to get the sugars that you need to do the cellular respiration. So while the plants can do this whole cycle here, heterotrophs like us, where we have to consume other organisms, we have to get that glucose, that sugar from our food. We have to breathe in the oxygen. We have mitochondria to do cellular respiration to make the energy that our cells need. We give off the water and the CO2, the carbon dioxide, and the plants keep the cycle going. So autotrophs can do both photosynthesis and cellular respiration because they have all the needed organelles. They contain both chloroplasts and mitochondria. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, like us, we only have the mitochondria, so we have to consume other organisms in order to get the glucose that we need, the sugar that we need in order to go through cellular respiration. But the end goal is to make this molecule called ATP, because that's how cells are able to do different types of functions. So what is ATP? Well, ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and it is the main energy molecule that our cells can use to do work. So this is what that molecule looks like. So adenosine comes from the combination of this ribose sugar and from this adenine nitrogenous base. And then the tri means 3. All right, we've got those 3 phosphate groups that are hanging out over here. Okay, so ATP is bite-sized energy. What do I mean by that? It's like a snack, right? You can consume that to keep you going, to keep making things work. But eventually, you need to consume something bigger to continue to function. Now, here's the thing. Remember we talked about chemical reactions. There's always energy that goes in to break the bonds in those atoms, and then you get energy back when you create the products. So when your cells do this thing called ATP cycling, right? I take that ATP, I break off a phosphate group and make a molecule called ADP plus the phosphate. I have enough energy for those cells to efficiently do some sort of process. Move something across the cell membrane, move something from one place in the cell to somewhere else, do another chemical reaction that requires a lot of energy to get it to start. And then I consume additional energy in my food breakdown to recreate the ATP. That energy here from the food are things like glucose, things like sugars. The problem is that your body can't take a single glucose molecule and immediately convert it into energy that your cells can use. There's just too much energy in a single glucose. So if I try to break it down, it literally would cause your body to spontaneously combust. You'd start on fire. There's so much energy bound up in the bonds that hold those carbons, those hydrogens, and those oxygens together. So instead, your body goes through a bunch of chemical reactions to break it down into small pieces, right? So rather than just scattering that molecule all at once, it's going to pull off little pieces at a time in chunks that your body can actually use. So think of it like trying to shove an entire cheeseburger in your mouth at once. You're probably going to choke, right? That's too much food in your mouth to break down at once. So what do? You take smaller bites, right? So that your body can actually digest it, break it down, get it down your throat and into your stomach safely. So ATP is those small little bites as opposed to trying to break down the glucose all at once. So this is the chemical reaction both for photosynthesis and for cellular respiration. You want to memorize this. All right, the question is you got to remember which direction the arrow goes. So if I'm looking from carbon dioxide, 6 of them, plus 6 molecules of water, and I go this direction, so I follow that green arrow to a single molecule of glucose, plus 6 molecules of oxygen, that's photosynthesis. So it takes in carbon dioxide and water from its environment, plus the energy from the sun, and creates sugar and oxygen from it. Only your autotrophs can go that direction. They are the only ones who can do photosynthesis. The opposite direction, taking those 6 molecules of oxygen, plus a glucose molecule, following the purple arrow now, to create 6 molecules of water and 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, that's cellular respiration. That's what we do. We breathe in the oxygen, we consume the sugars in our diet, and we give off the water and the carbon dioxide. That is cellular respiration. Now, we do that, but so do autotrophs. They're going to take their own sugars and their own oxygen that they create from photosynthesis and then use it back the other direction to create carbon dioxide and water, which then feeds back into their photosynthesis process. So they do both directions, which also means they contain both energy organelles, where us as heterotrophs only contain the one. So this is the big cycle that we're really looking at here, right? In comes energy from the sun, goes through photosynthesis, creates glucose and oxygen, which then gets fed into cellular respiration to create ATP that your cells can use to do different things. And then water and carbon dioxide come off as a byproduct. That gets fed back into the photosynthesis with the sun, creating the glucose and the oxygen and keeping this cycle going. So the major energy organelle for autotrophs really starts off with these chloroplasts. These are plant only, these are autotroph only. And those chloroplasts, their job is to be where photosynthesis takes place. So this is where we convert energy from the sun, that's solar energy, right, sun energy, to chemical energy, aka ATP, and form ultimately glucose in the process. So here's your chemical reaction just for photosynthesis. 6 molecules of CO2 plus 6 molecules of water with the help of energy from the sun gets us glucose plus 6 molecules of oxygen. You want to make sure that you practice and memorize this. You need to know it. And those chloroplasts are the process, or are the place, I should say, where this process happens. And we find these in plants, but we also find it in other single-celled autotrophs as well, things like protists, bacteria, so on and so forth. Your mitochondria also exist in plants, right? Big idea. Both plants and animals contain mitochondria. If you are a heterotroph, this is all you have. Okay? And so your only option then is to eat other organisms to get your glucose. You breathe in your oxygen, and then you give off carbon dioxide, water, and a bunch of ATP. And they do that through the process of cellular respiration. Plants do this too, but they're making their own glucose to start with. Autotrophs get to make this themselves. Heterotrophs have to get it from their environment or get it from their diet. So your mitochondria, that's this guy right here, right, kind of remind me of those like circus peanuts. And these guys are the ones where that energy from either the food you're consuming or the sugars you're creating as an autotroph go through the process of cellular respiration with the help of oxygen to make a bunch of ATP, make a bunch of energy, small bite-sized energy that the cells can actually use to do things as opposed to literally like choking on too much glucose, too much sugar.